Hello, I'm Dan Ware. Welcome to another Frankly Franklin. As you saw from that camera shot at the beginning of the show, and we'll go back to it here now, there are 5 of us seated at this table, and we differ a little bit in our ages, but we all have one thing in common, at least one thing, and that is that we went to the Barnes School in East Simpson County, and we all have fond memories of that school. That's our topic today. We're going to talk about the school at Barnes. It's been over 25 years now since anyone could say that they were a student of Barnes, but those of us who went there remember it fondly, and it was an important part of Simpson County's history. So we're going to talk a little bit about that with our guests. Let me introduce them to you now. First, seated closest to me here is Evelyn Barnes, and her husband's family is the family that the school was named after. We're going to get her to tell a little bit about that in just a minute. Next to her is James Gilbert Buchanan, Gib Buchanan, he was called when he was at Barnes. And Mr. Buchanan is 98 years young, I believe. Am I correct about that? And I didn't ask you how old you are. I've been told not to ask a lady her age. But I
I'll tell you what year I was born.
And we can do the math.
1918.
Okay, all
I was
right.
4 months old the day World War II closed.
Oh, okay.
I mean World War I.
World War I, right. All right. Well, let me finish introducing our guests here. On the other side of Gib, Pearl Humes, who was a student at Barnes and then later returned there as a teacher and principal. And finally, at the other end of the table from me, Joyce Hardcastle. I guess she was Joyce Gorham when she was at Barnes. And she was there. We're a little closer to the same time, but not exactly the same. So let me start out by just kind of putting everybody's time period in reference. I was at Barnes School in the last half of the 1950s, and I attended what I guess was the last Barnes School building. It was a relatively new building when I was in it, and there were just 6 grades there at that time. Now, you told me what year you were born, 1918. So I'm guessing that you must have been going to Barnes in the 1920s then, is that right?
No,
No?
I didn't go to Barnes until I was in high school.
Okay,
I went to the graded schools at Hillsdale and Paradise,
okay,
and because we were closer to those schools. And I graduated from the 8th grade at the old Hillsdale School.
okay,
And we lived right at the Hillsdale store. And part of the time, I walked from Hillsdale to Barnes, and then we moved over in the Paradise School District, and I walked from there to Barnes part of the time, which was
you had a pretty long walk then,
a
didn't
pretty
you?
long walk.
Okay, well now, those other schools you went to were just elementaries, right?
Yes.
The only high school
Only high school
in the eastern part was at Barnes.
So
Okay.
now Round Pond was in the eastern part, but then when I
North and
went to
south,
Barnes,
uh-huh.
it was only a 2-year high school.
Okay. Now, Gib, when were you at Barnes?
I was at Barnes for the 8th grade at first.
Uh-huh.
I went to the Hillsdale School first, Cedar
Okay.
Hill, we called it then.
Uh-huh.
And then, the first year that I was there, I had graduated from the 7th grade to the 8th up in Illinois at the school up there.
Oh,
But
okay.
when I went to the Cedar Hill, I was in the school there, and when school was over, I was promoted to the 8th grade again.
Oh, really? Okay. Congratulations.
The teacher said she didn't have an 8th grade. I was the only one in it.
I see.
So then my mother decided to send me to Barnes.
Uh-huh.
And I went over there to the 8th grade until along in the winter, and we moved. And then I went to Paradise.
Okay.
And then in 1925, I went back to Barnes. Well, I was in the 8th grade 4 years.
Okay.
And I went back to Barnes in 1925. That was
Okay.
my junior year in high school.
I see. All right, and then you graduated from Barnes then? Did you get a high school diploma?
I didn't
from Barnes?
graduate, really.
Oh,
I
really?
only
Okay.
graduated here last last year.
Oh, really? Well, congratulations then. Okay.
I was a veteran, and they give us our diplomas, but
Oh, okay.
I only went 3 years at Barnes.
I see. Okay.
And I got married and left.
All right. Well, we're glad that you are back here today. Let me go on to my next guest now.
All right.
Ann, when was your time at Barnes as a student first?
From 36 through 39.
Okay. So was it still a high school then?
It was a high school. At the time that I started to Barnes, they were in the process of building that rock gymnasium out there.
Okay.
So I was in the my first year was when they finished the gym. And we had a gymnasium there.
Yeah, well, that was built by the WPA, I think,
I
wasn't it?
think so, yes.
And of course, that was still in use when I was going to school there in the new brick building.
Well, like I said, I started in 36
Uh-huh.
and then graduated in 39. I'd gone to school 1 year here in Franklin.
I see. All right, and Joyce, what about you?
I started at Barnes in 54, first
Okay.
grade, and the first grade at that time was in the gymnasium. They petitioned off some rooms for the different grades. The first grade was separate, and then second and third grade was together, fourth and fifth grade was together, and then sixth grade was separate.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel Richards Loudermilk was the principal when I started, and I was so disappointed because Mr. Barnes' sister, Miss Maribel, taught first grade at Barnes, and I had been with my aunt Gladys Gorham,
Right.
John's now she is. I had rode the bus with her several times to school. Back then you could go. You could get on the bus and go to school with a brother or sister or cousin, and I had gone with her a few times, and I just loved Maribel.
Uh-huh.
Well, she came to Franklin to teach,
Oh.
and I cried my eyes out because I loved her so. I mean, I'd already got acquainted with her. And I knew I was not going to like Rebecca Coomer. I just knew from the get-go I was, of course I did, I loved her.
Yeah.
Rebecca Coomer was a wonderful teacher. And then, of course, I guess I was in the third grade, I believe, might have been second, when we actually got to move into the new brick building.
Okay.
And we thought we had died and gone to heaven.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just beautiful, just a beautiful building. And of course, Beatrice Martin was my teacher in second and third grade.
Well, you and I had same teachers because, I moved in the middle of the year. I had been at Prospect Hill for the first half of the year, and Nell Jepson, who taught for many years, was my first grade teacher, and I thought we couldn't replace her, but that Rebecca Coomer was equal to the task. And then I had Mildred Gent.
Yes.
And did you have
I
her
did.
as well? Okay. And I think Mary Harrell was okay. All right. Who are some of the teachers that you all remember from when you were there? Was there anybody in particular that taught you at Barnes that you felt like had a real influence on you? I know what your answer is going to be, so you wait, because I know what you're going to tell me. So, Ann, let's start with you. Do you remember any particular teachers from your time at Barnes?
Well, the year that I started at Barnes, Robert Boyd was the principal. And Henry Barnes, Evelyn husband, was one of my teachers. And I think that year we only had just the two teachers in high school.
Mm-hmm.
The following, the following year we had another teacher added, so we had three.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know any particularly one that had any more influence on me than others did.
Well, were there enough teachers that you didn't have different teachers for different subjects? There weren't enough teachers or students either.
No.
I mean, the same person that taught you English taught you math, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, the first year I was there, like I said, we had, well, I guess both years, all 3 years I was there, we had just two rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And one teacher had one room and one had the other, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they taught everything that there was to teach.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember just how Miss Jack Hall came in. She was there my last year, and we did a little bit of switching.
Uh-huh.
But Mr. Barnes Mr. Barnes taught, well, we switched back and forth some, because Mr. Barnes always taught the math classes.
Uh-huh.
And Robert Boyd taught the English and that year, and then Wiley Chapman came in the next year. And he was my teacher when I was in the 11th grade, and started the year I was in my senior year, and then he left. And I shouldn't go into all this because I think there was a change of superintendents and a big
Well,
about that.
whatever controversy there was has probably died down by now, so I think we would be okay on that. Let me go on to Gib. Do you remember any of your teachers in particular from the time you were there?
Very much so. C.S. Akron was my principal,
Uh-huh.
and I think he had the greatest influence in my life of anybody in the world.
Is that right?
He, I had a handicap whenever I went over there to school. Well, even in the 8th grade. It scared me to death if they called on me to get up and recite in front of the class or
Oh,
something
really?
like that.
Yeah.
I was very nervous about it. And the first day of high school, it was announced that we would be put on our honor about leaving the room.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you're all old enough to know when you have to go and when you don't, and that we will not ask you just to ask permission, just get up and go.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the first thing they threw at us, we had to make a short talk in the English class.
Mm-hmm.
And so it scared me to death. And whenever it come time for the English class, I got up and left the room. And I didn't come back to the room. And I got out of it. The second day, I pulled the same trick. But when I did it the third day, I was called to the principal's office. And he said, I noticed you're not attending the English class. He said, I'd like to know about that. I said, well, you form habits. And he said, now wait a minute. Ain't you just afraid to get up and make that short talk?
Uh-huh.
I said, yes, I'll confess that I am, and I will not do it. I'll leave school first. I said, I just can't do it. He said, now you don't want to go through life that way. He was very understanding.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if you'll trust me, I'll break you of that habit.
Okay.
And I said, well, I wish somebody would. So he said, you stay tomorrow, and I'll promise not to call on you. I said, all right. So I stayed, and he called on Rick Finn, Spencer Finn. I think
Okay.
he called him Saul in later years.
Oh, yeah, I know
He
you're
was sitting right in front of me, he's a cousin of mine.
Uh-huh.
Well, he got up and he propped himself awkwardly on his desk, and I could see the back of his neck getting red, and his voice trembled and his knees shook, and I never was as sorry for a boy in my life. And I realized that I was not the only one.
Right.
He got through it, and it didn't
Okay.
kill him.
All right.
And so I decided I would stay, and I did, and I made the short talk. Then a little later on, he was going to have a declamation contest, and he called me in the office and said, I want you to enter. I'll do you good. I said, oh, I'd rather die. He said, no, now you promised to trust me. And he said, you probably won't win.
Yeah.
But he said, I'm going to give you a good declamation to do.
Okay.
So he gave me Spartacus to the Gladiators.
All right.
And I memorized it. I won the contest.
Well, all right.
He figured I would.
Uh-huh.
I come to Franklin and had to be in the county contest, and I won that. And then I had to go to Bowling Green and appear at the college. And I come in second up there. It so happened. And that kind of, I was still scared. But then he got to put me in every play that we had. I had a part in every play at Barnes School at the time I was there. And I liked that.
Uh-huh.
And it broke me completely of being nervous in front of a microphone or anything. And it, I think, has influenced my life into being into show business. And I don't care if there's 10,000 people sitting out there. it don't matter with me anymore.
And if that principal hadn't done what he'd done, you might have still been,
He cured me.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, instead of letting you stay outside, and changed your life.
I know he did it on purpose. He really knew how to cure me.
Well, let's go to Evelyn now. Speaking of teachers that changed your life, tell me a little bit about your teachers and one in particular.
When I first started school, we lived in the Hillsdale district.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Hillsdale when I was in the first and second grades.
Okay.
And we thought we were going to move to Bowling Green and rented our farm. And it so happened we didn't go to Bowling Green, and we moved in the Paradise School District.
Okay.
And I went to school to Paradise. I went to school to Miss Nellie Ford. I think all of these people know her.
Mhm.
Probably.
She taught kindergarten.
Yeah, I had her for 1 year, and then Etta Reed Gammons,
Mm-hmm.
who was Etta Reed Farmer.
Okay.
And she was the teacher the second year I was in school there. And then we moved back home, and I went to the old Hillsdale School from then until I graduated from 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary Alley Barger Copus was my teacher. Well, Robert Boyd was my teacher in the 5th and 6th grade, and he lived with us one of those years.
Mm-hmm. And let me interrupt you for
Okay.
just a second. You've mentioned Mr. Boyd, and Anna Pearl mentioned him too. And some of our younger people may not know who that is, but they might know Lillian
He was
Whitfield.
William Whitfield's brother.
And Miss Whitfield and Mr. Whitfield taught here in Franklin
Yes.
for many years.
I went
And-
to school with Lillian.
Okay, and she was an excellent teacher and storyteller. Okay, I just wanted to say who she was, I mean who Mr. Boyd was for the younger people. Now you go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's see. I was at, where was I when we stopped at?
I think when you got into high school with
I
that.
got into high school. Okay. The first 2 years that I was in high school, I had Mr. Boyd, well, and Eddie Belcher.
Mm-hmm.
And they had been schoolmates at Western and
Mhm.
roommates and good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we all became good friends and went to school 2 years to them. Then the last 2 years, I had Henry Barnes
Uh-huh.
and can't remember right off who the other teacher was. But anyway, I went to Barnes all 4 years in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, now your late husband, Mr. Barnes, Henry Barnes, of course, taught at the high school here in Franklin for a number of years, and he taught me geometry. And I don't know if he taught Joyce. Did you have Mr. Barnes?
I
in
did not
class?
have Mr. Barnes. I did
I
Okay.
not
had
have Mr.
geometry and arithmetic both under him.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I went to Western for 2 years, and we married then.
Okay.
And then he had to go into service, and we lived in Oregon for a while in different places
Mhm.
when he was in service.
Did you have any idea when you were going to Barnes High School and he was teaching you that one day you would wind up marrying him? Was that in the back of your mind?
Never thought about it when I started in.
Yeah, isn't it funny how things work out?
Sure is.
And you mentioned Mary Copus, too. And of course, she taught school for over 50 years. That's another person a lot of people remember. I had Miss Copus at the junior high school in town. Anybody else have
Yes,
Miss
I
Copus as a teacher?
I had her the first years that she taught school down from Hillsdale School.
Oh, really? Okay. So that would have been very early on in her career, right?
She,
I was in the class with her.
Okay.
she was an extremely good teacher.
Uh-huh. Well, her son, Eddie B.
Eddie
Copus,
Bruce,
right? He told me that he started at Barnes, he was in, I think in 1942 about, and then 20 years later he wound up back at Barnes as principal. So it's interesting that some of the same families through several generations, and I think the Barnes family, even back the very first Barnes school in like the 1830s, the reason it's a Barnes school, somebody in the Barnes family donated the land to put it on.
Henry's ancestors is who gave the land for the Barnes School.
Mm-hmm.
And then that old school that was down there, they were instrumental, of course, in that. And then Henry lost his father when he was just a very small boy, and his mother went on and saw that that new school was built then. What was, you know, the second Barnes,
Now, was it a brick building?
Yes, it was a brick building.
Was it, we talked earlier about the last building, which is where I went,
Yes.
and the stone gymnasium. The building that you're talking about, I think,
I was going
is this the
there.
building you're talking about?
That's the one that I went to.
All right, Andrew, can you see if you can get a picture of that? Is that as close as you can get, Glenn, or has Andrew got it any better? Okay. All right, now did this building burn? Is that right?
It eventually burned then.
Okay.
It burned in later years.
So is that why Joyce, I think it was Joyce said that they had classes doubled up in the stone gymnasium, or was that Anna Pearl? That was you? Yeah. Was that because this building had burned that they had to do that? Okay. Do you have any memory of this building?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't have any memory of that.
Do you go to this building?
That's what I went to.
Okay.
That's the
Okay.
building I went to.
What year did it burn, Anna Pearl? Do you remember?
No, I really don't. I'm not sure that might have been while we were in Germany.
This is a pretty good sized building.
It was a nice building, and there were two entrances, one on each side of that little part you can see out to the front, and a stairway, two stairways up.
Okay.
And then in between those two stairways was another room up there. So there were
That
three
was Mary
rooms back
Bell's
there.
room.
Okay.
There's 2 stories in the basement.
Uh-huh.
That had a basement in
You know, furnace is in the basement.
I've got a picture here on the back side of this of, I guess, all the students at the school. And looks like that's pretty much all ages. And I don't know that we can get, Andrew, you want to see if you can get, I don't know if you can tell enough about that, but what would you say, 75 to 100 kids maybe, or is that too
I
many?
would
How
think
many
that's
was
about-
there in all the grades,
Because it
right?
was 12 grades, I would think it was that many.
Okay. Well, now, when you all were there, was the school day about like it is now? Did it start about 8 o'clock in the morning,
Started
go
at
about
8
3?
o'clock.
or-
8 o'clock.
Went to about 3 to 4. I think we used to go to 4 o'clock.
Okay.
And then I don't remember when they shortened the days. Do any of you?
No, I don't
We
remember.
didn't have daylight saving time then.
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't know when the teaching days was shortened.
if you walked from Hillsdale to get there, what time would you have to leave the house in the morning to be there in time for school to start?
It took me around 40 minutes to walk from Hillsdale. to
Each way?
Barnes.
And you walk every day regardless of the weather, right?
I
Yeah.
never missed a day unless I was sick or something that happened that way.
Uh-huh. Did you have people that walked with you, or did you have to walk by yourself?
James Lee Sadler lived right close to me, and sometimes we walked together. And now some of the kids that were a farther distance rode ponies and horses. There were stables down by the old Barnes School,
Uh-huh.
and where they
The
could
wood
leave,
building.
where
Uh-huh.
they could leave their ponies and horses. And I had a cousin who lived over in the Paradise School District, and when she started, she rode a pony. Sometimes I'd ride behind her on the
Uh-huh.
pony.
Yeah. Anybody else ride a pony to school, or
You know.
how'd you get there, Gib?
Well, I walked.
Okay, were you
I
close,
walked,
or
I
did you have a
lived way
pretty good
down
walk?
on Drake's Creek, on Lake Creek. I was really out of the Barnes district, but I walked to school every day. Now, Lily Mae Perry, her and Nellie and Princess all drove a buggy, and they put their horse in the stables.
Uh-huh.
And Drusilla Slate, she came on in a buggy too. There were several of them that came in a buggy or rode a horse.
I see.
Naomi Leffy, she rode a pony.
A lot
Okay.
of people rode horses then, or ponies to school. That was their transportation.
Well, of course, by the time I came along, we had buses to do all that. Anybody have any idea when they started bus transportation?
Gosh, you
The
know,
first bus that came by our house would have been 36,
Okay.
because I would have gone to Barnes the year before had there been a bus to Barnes.
I see.
Did
So I
you
know-
say 36?
36, because
Well, now, didn't any buses go while I was going to Barnes on Pearl? And I graduated, it might have been the fall of 36.
fall 36, yeah.
Okay.
So you graduated in 36?
I graduated in May of 36.
Okay, well, you left and I took your place, now that. No, I said, I really took Merle Dean Pennington's place. Do you remember her?
Oh, yes,
The first year that I went to Barnes, Merle Dean had lived out there, and she had been in that class. And then I think her father died or something, and they moved into town. So she went to school in town. I had been going to school in town. I came to Barnes.
Merle Dean was Billy Bishop's sister. You may know Billy Bishop.
Didn't he work for Southern States
Yes.
for a long time? Okay. Yeah.
He was an adopted brother, wasn't he?
I think that they were both adopted. I'm not really sure.
I don't believe Merle Dean was.
Maybe she
Billy
was.
Billy was an adopted
Okay.
child.
Everybody come by bus, Joyce, when you were there, and
Yeah, I don't remember anybody, the parents bringing them.
Right.
We rode the bus 16 for several
you
years.
had 16, 18, I think
Mhm.
was the bus number that
Yep.
I rode some.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Now, I had to walk about a half a mile or a little farther.
Uh-huh.
In the wintertime, Daddy usually would take us
Okay.
during the bad days.
Uh-huh.
We walked some of the bad days. When
you
I first
walked to meet the bus
meet the
or
bus,
walked to meet
yeah,
the bus?
yeah. Our lane was about a half a mile off the road. We lived back at the King Maggie place.
Okay.
And so I had to walk, and I hated it. I just hated that walk. One morning, it was in the spring, I'm not sure, I might have been in the second grade, because after Larry started, and I was like in the fourth grade when he started. Well, I had a partner, but up until that time I had to walk by myself.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got started out that morning, and I turned this right-hand curve and out toward the road, and oh, I saw the biggest snake I'd ever seen in my life. And I took off back to the house just as hard as I could go, and do you know what that was? It was a shade of a tree limb
Oh, really?
on this bank. Now, can you imagine not being able to tell the difference in the shade of a tree limb and a snake? But I was terrified of snakes, and I hated that walk.
Uh-huh.
And of course, by the time I got back to the house, I'd missed the bus, and Daddy did take me on, but he took me by the bank and said, I want to see where that snake is. And
Uh-huh.
there was no snake there. There was the shadow.
Now, when I was there in the back of the gymnasium building, there was a cafeteria, and they fed us lunch every day, and I guess that was true for you, Joyce.
That was true.
Did you all get a lunch? Did
No.
they provide a lunch, or
No.
That
did you
gym
bring
was-
anything?
That
or-
gym was built when I was going to
Okay.
school there. And Robert Boyd was instrumental in getting that built, and they hauled the limestone rock and all. I can't remember exactly where they came from, but they came from the county.
It was in that area, though,
Yes,
right?
out in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
But Mr. Boyd was very instrumental in getting that gym erected at Barnes.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, Gib, you would have been there before that stone gymnasium was built. Was there?
Oh, yeah, we had to practice on the outdoor court. I was on the basketball team, it was a dirt court.
And played outdoors.
You couldn't do much dribbling, there's no assurance of which way the ball would bounce, you know.
Uh-huh.
And
But
we
would
did a
you,
lot of passing.
would you get out and play just about all winter long, or stay inside on the
No,
cold
we
days?
only practiced, we played basketball this summer only.
Who, did you play against any of the other schools in Simpson County? Did you
Yes,
have
we
rivalries?
played Woodburn, we played Franklin, we played all those
Middleton.
schools up in here. We went to the tournament in Scottsville and played Bowling Green, I don't know, several other schools. We was always playing a game every week.
Uh-huh.
We always got beat.
Well, maybe if you could have been inside a little more, it might have had a little better result.
Well, if we had had a gym, we could have played better,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't have a place to practice.
Were there any other sports, or did you all have activities? I know when I was there in elementary school, we went outside for recess about every day. We play a lot of Red Rover and stuff like that, and but I don't think we played much basketball.
There was a 4-H club organized while, it was a little bit later on, it wasn't while I was in school. But
Uh-huh.
that was one thing they had, and I don't know, because I was a 4-H leader when
I
was
see. And it met there.
And
Okay.
it met there.
Okay.
Eddie B. used to get a pretty good softball game going.
Well, did
Oh,
he?
yes.
He
Okay.
liked to play softball, and while my girls were going to school there,
Mhm.
they were out there on that softball.
Well, now, there was quite a bit of playground equipment there. I mean, there was swings and seesaws and jungle gym and stuff like
Right.
that. But some of us, during recess, in spite of all that equipment being there, there was a bit of woods just right down from there. And we'd go down into the woods, and then, we'd build little forts, and then we, go play in the woods for however long recess was, and come back. And as far as I know, nobody ever complained about that.
That's where the old stables were when I was going.
Oh, where that woods was, yeah, okay.
Across this road from the old school building.
Okay.
The old wooden school building.
Okay.
The years that I was there as a student, there was no water at school. We went down the road a little way to Henry Frank Richards Spring and carried water to school, up to the school building. So, and I know two of us would ask to go, and we'd have a tobacco stick or something that we could stick through the handle of the bucket. So have a pretty good sized bucket to carry.
So, did everybody drink out of a dipper, or how did you do
We
that?
pretty much carried those little, collapsible cups.
Okay,
I had done that when I was in grade school too. So that wasn't anything unusual. And you were mentioning a while ago horses. The school that I went to at Hardwell had a little shed, and I never did ride horseback to school, except that Daddy was on there and took me. But I think a time or two he did when it was snowing or something, and didn't want me trying to wade the snow. But there was a little shed where they could bring and put their ponies, and a couple of families did
Yeah.
ride horseback.
That's interesting that they had
Was
that.
the
available.
spring there when you was at Barnes?
I don't remember a spring, no, sir.
That beat anything I ever seen. It was down in a hole. I don't know how they ever found the water, but you'd go down steps. They were rock steps,
Yeah.
and at the bottom there was a big limestone rock, and there was a basin cut out in that, and there was a little trickle of water that came into that basin and filled it up, and that's where we got our water.
Okay.
It was, it's filled up now. I don't know
Now, they
when
talked
it
about
was done.
They talked about the spring being there when I was
Yeah.
at Barnes, but I never
You-
did go down to
Was
it.
the spring still there when you went?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
I've
never
been-
go down to it.
I've
I
been
don't
there.
remember.
We carried water from it, and every once in a while, it's kind of fun to get permission to go to the spring.
If I remember correctly, there was a cistern close
Yeah.
to the door of the cafeteria, the
Yes,
outside door of the
I remember
cafeteria.
that.
Yeah.
That's
They
right.
passed the water bucket around then, everybody drank out of it.
Yeah,
Drank
yeah,
out of it.
sure did, didn't we? Yeah, and I don't know that we weren't about as healthy then as we are now. Yeah.
And Dan, I don't know if you recall or not, but I thought when I was at Barnes School, the cafeteria was a really large room.
It seemed very
It
big.
seemed
yeah.
very big.
Yeah.
And not until I went to a Barnes School reunion that you, Reed, had prepared the food for, I thought, this room is so small. It shrunk. But it was just, I thought it was really a large room when I was
Seemed that way to me too. Lots of
Yeah.
tables and plenty of room.
We
there,
had
yeah.
some programs in there. There was a little stage set up that we had some programs in there like at Christmas time.
Yeah.
I thought it was big.
Well, Gib had mentioned being in plays earlier. When you all were there a lot of school plays and functions that
We had
parents and community people would come and attend?
we had a play going most of the time.
Really?
There was I remember the basketball team had a play we called Lighthouse Nan. And I had the part of the old lighthouse keeper, Ichabod Buzzard. I really showed off in that one. I enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
Drusilla Slate was supposed to be my wife, and she was a nagger. We had a big time of plays. I was in the senior play when I was just a freshman. He found a part for me in the play.
I guess it was all that experience you had from all those years in the 8th grade that got you ready to come in the
I
senior
was
class.
Fletcher Henson's brother. And
Anybody else in the play or any kind of?
Well, there was a stage in the auditorium.
Yeah.
and,
we had a good auditorium.
And it
In the old
had a
school.
place behind, with curtains on the stage, and
Uh-huh.
a place behind the curtains that you could go from one side of the stage to the other.
Right.
And if you needed to go in to do your thing, why, you'd go in from either side.
Okay. Okay.
I think the seniors always had a play when I was in school there.
Think what?
They had a senior play. It was always just the senior class
Yeah.
that did a play. And then after I started teaching it there, we always had a fall festival.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And
Yeah,
I always
the
did
fall
some,
festival. Yeah.
some kind of a play one time during the year. We didn't have them all the time, but we always had one play during the year that tried to get just about everybody in the school into, which could turn out to be a problem when you had everybody out there. But
Mildred
we
Gent
Uh-huh.
was really good about writing our plays.
Mhm.
And I was in one that was called The Children of Buttercup Commons.
Okay.
And then, I'm not sure the name of the other one that she did that I really enjoyed, but we did a Mexican hat dance in it.
Oh, really?
And we had partners. There was like 4 couples that did the
Uh-huh.
dance, and myself and Jimmy McLemore was
Okay.
one of the couples, and that just thrilled me because we were about half sweet on each other.
Uh-huh.
And there was like 4 couples that did this. Norman Eldridge was in that play, and Larry Adamson, Sylvia Alexander,
Mm-hmm.
Diane Hall. I think Hilda Jones Cook was in the.
Okay.
Well, I know
Had
she was
ice
in it.
cream
Hilda,
suppers.
yeah.
Ice cream suppers?
We
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
ice cream suppers.
Would there be
Yeah.
a lot of people that would come to that?
Yes, that was a means of making money for the school.
Uh-huh.
And,
I remember one play where Carly and Holcomb had a pet hen in the play.
Had it out on the stage, huh?
Yeah, and the hen had to show off on the night of the show. He ruined Carlene's front of her dress.
Oh, my.
I think it was the year,
Nothing like a live theater.
Right out on the stage.
Yeah.
yeah, when I started teaching there, Eddie Copas was principal.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And my girls both, the first year I started teaching, I wouldn't let them come to Barnes because I was going to teach 2nd grade and Kathy was going to be in 2nd grade. But I told them the next year if they wanted to come to Barnes, they could. So they both, from then on, went through the 6th grade at Barnes. And I know one year they did Hansel and Gretel. And we had Jackie Powell, Jackie Bartle, she was then, was the witch, and boy was she ever great. But they stuffed her in the stove, and she passed out, and I remember.
Oh, my.
So we had some experiences.
Did you all have any kind of music classes or anything? Do any singing
No.
when you were there?
well, we'd sing, but,
Okay.
just with no music.
Because I know Miss Hood would come and teach us
Well, now
maybe
the
twice a
piano
week.
taught.
Okay.
Piano was taught. Miss Bradley, Mary Frances Bradley was our teacher.
Uh-huh.
Well, in later years, when I was teaching there, Gladys Holcomb came out and taught.
Yes, she did.
Okay. Well, do you all feel like that your time that you spent at just a little country school, do you all feel that prepared you pretty well for going out in the world and for life, or do you think you missed anything by not going to a big city school?
No.
I don't think I missed anything.
Oh, no, I didn't.
You were
You
close
get more
together,
personal
you were
attention.
friends, and I don't know, there's just something about the closeness of the students and all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I went to a one-room school and then to the high school at Barnes.
I appreciate the discipline that we had.
Mm-hmm.
I know that our society now doesn't allow it, and our government doesn't allow it in a lot of schools, but we knew, by George, if we got into trouble, we were going to get punished.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written many assignments. I never did actually get a lick on the bottom, but I had Beatrice Martin to pop a pencil across my head a few times. And she didn't mind doing it. She could take a wooden pencil and crack it good across your head. I know somebody would arrest her this day and time, but
Probably so, yeah.
you know, it meant, it just gave you a direction.
Uh-huh.
And part of loving children, whether it's at home or in school, is discipline. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
I don't think they do.
It's a shame that
I think that they made a mistake in putting all the kids in one school. I think the smaller school, you got more personal attention.
Uh-huh.
And I know Mr. Aker, he not only influenced my life in that way, but he was good to me in a lot of other ways. Of course, I had to walk about 5 miles, and in bad weather, I missed school some. And he called me in the office and told me that he wanted to arrange for me to stay closer to school. And he took me down to the neighbor's house, Fletcher Henson's, Willie Henson's house, and arranged for me to stay during, from Monday through Friday. And then he said I could tend the furnace for him, and he'd pay my board.
Oh, well, that was my
And
yeah.
that wasn't all he did. He was very good to me. I know at Christmas time, or along right after Christmas, my Uncle Tom Pritchett, that lived here in Bowling Green, he come to get me to come up to Bowling Green and work at his boys' service station.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him I was going to school, I couldn't do it. Principal, he was against it. He said, well, you can't take him out of school, he loses all his credits.
Uh-huh.
And, but anyhow, Uncle Tom was insistent about it and did take me.
Right.
And the first week, I believe it was the second week I was up there, Mr. Aker showed up. He came to Bowling Green to see if I was continuing studying. And I told him I had took all my books, and I was studying some. And he said, well, if you will study, I'll come up here each week and give you the lessons. And if you can pass the final examination, why, we'll see if you get your credits.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. I studied at night and worked at the filling station daytime, and he came back every week and give me the line of lessons to study, and I went back and took the final exam and passed, got a good grade.
Well, good for you.
And
Yeah.
that's some of the things that Mr. Aker did for me.
All right. You all correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that other than Gib here, most of us that are sitting here today have lived and worked most of the time here in the county, the same county that Barnes is in, where we went to school. Am I right about that?
Well,
Okay.
This has been my home.
Uh-huh.
I spent 2.5 years in Germany back
In
then.
Germany.
Yeah, back while my husband was in service.
Uh-huh.
And I worked at Wright Field up in Dayton, Ohio during World War II, and I haven't always lived here, but if anybody said, where are you from?
This was always
This was
home.
home. Mhm.
Well, I want, go ahead.
I spent time in Oregon when Henry was
Uh-huh.
in service. We lived out there for several months. We had to go overseas.
Right, okay. Well, we've all had a chance to be away some, but probably the traveling prize would go to Gib. He mentioned back early when we started the program that he'd had a career in show business, and I'm going to try to do a program with him at another time to talk about that. But I want you to just mention a little bit about that today, Gib. When you were going to school out at Barnes, how did you wind up going into entertaining? Did that just happen by fluke, or is that something you had planned on? Or
I think that the plays that I was in at Barnes, and I know Willard Whiten came to the school, he had graduated there. He came to school and organized a Negro minstrel one time, and I had a good part in that. I had a whole scene in that, a whole skit in that, and called it Rickety Rackety Radio. And that put the bug on me, I reckon.
Okay.
I like show business.
Uh-huh.
And so when I was offered a job in show business, I took it.
So you got to travel, I guess, pretty much all over in your show business career?
I've been everywhere. I reckon. There's only, I think, 3 of the states that I haven't been in. That's up in the Far East, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. I haven't visited those states. But I even toured Alaska and all through Canada.
Uh-huh.
And we played the Saskatoon Fair for a whole week. And we did a lot of traveling. That was the bad part.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people think that show business is great and that it's an easy life. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world.
Yeah, sleeping in a different...
The agents don't have pity on how far you have to travel to a show.
Uh-huh.
I know one of the trips that we made, I was riding in the car with Jimmy Newman and Stonewall Jackson and Roger Miller and the boy from Birmingham. Can't think of his name. But we left Nashville and went to Duluth, Minnesota for our afternoon and night show
Yeah,
the next day.
that's a
The
long
next
drive.
day was at Des Moines, Iowa, afternoon and night show.
Right.
The next day was at Winnipeg, Canada, afternoon and night show. Now, that gives you an idea of,
That's a lot of traveling, isn't
you
it?
didn't have time to stop and get some
Yeah.
bite to eat or nothing.
He and Henry were good friends, and if they ever had a show anywhere that we could go, we always went to them.
Uh-huh.
He'd be,
Well, talking about Henry, me and Henry went to school together,
Uh-huh.
and I used to go home with him. Well, he went home with me some, but I went home with him when we had a hard geometry lesson or something. Me and Henry set up, and he helped me a lot with my mathematics. He was good.
Yeah, well, he's definitely knew his
He
stuff
was
on
great in mathematics. He loved them.
Can I tell you a little story about Henry?
Sure.
The year that I was a junior, we had, I don't know how many people in our class. I don't know, but the year that I graduated, there were only 8 people in our class. And that was the year that, the year before, that Henry and Evelyn had married. And so Wally Chapman was our teacher that year, and he came in and he said, well, we did have a good class, but Henry Barnes stopped matrimony last year. Let's see, there were Tom Markham and Edith Dinwiddie that got married.
Yeah.
John L. Holcomb got married. Jack Slate. I guess it was 3 of them. Kind of cut our class down.
Something in the air that year, yeah. Did you find when you went back out there to teach, was there a lot of difference, or were things kids pretty
Well,
much
of
were
course,
kids?
it was completely different because we had the new building.
Right.
And at that time, the first year I taught in the old gym.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have enough room really, and I was teaching 2nd grade, and I taught in what had been the old gym, but part of it was partitioned off, but they'd still bring kids into the gym, so we had a hard time that year with hearing. During the summertime when they could play outside, it was fine, but when it was bad weather, sometimes you couldn't hear what was going on.
We've got just a little bit of time left. I'm going to talk about the fact that there's a Barnes reunion every year. I think it's in October, isn't it?
First Sunday in
first Sunday in
October.
October.
Okay. Any idea how long that's been going on, that there's been a Barnes School reunion?
I can tell you just a minute. I think it was started in 76.
I believe that's right. I believe 75.
75 or 76.
75.
So
It was
going
the-
on 30 years now then.
Right.
My sister owned the old Barnes School and the gym and all of that land until recently.
Right, because they would have sold that in the late 70s when they brought the kids to town. That's
And
that
Eva
Eva Finn?
Eva Finn
Uh-huh.
owned that. She has sold it since to the fellow that lives out there. But she owned it for several years.
Mm-hmm. Well, since that is private property now, where is the Barnes School reunion held each year?
Blue Bradley Building.
At the Blue Bradley. And how's the attendance usually? Do a lot of people come? for that. All right.
Well, of course, most of the ones that went to Barnes, a lot of them are not here anymore. And,
Kind of hard for them to get to the reunion, right?
It's kind of hard to get to the reunion.
The
But
first year,
considering, I think we still have pretty good attendance, don't you all?
Yes, and we could have more. I think a lot of people felt like that it was for the people that graduated from Barnes School.
When it was a high school.
But
But it was
have,
for everyone.
yeah, we've
that-
announced for everyone
it's
for several
everyone
years.
that went to
Yeah.
Barnes School.
the first year that they had it was when Mr. Boyd came back from, he'd been everywhere, I guess, and he wanted to get together all of the people who had been there when he was principal.
Yeah.
So it did start out as high school, but now there's not many of us left. I'm telling you, I'm the youngest one that graduated from Barnes High School. So, you know.
Uh-huh.
Robert
Have you-
Boyd was very instrumental in my life. He lived with us one year when he taught at Hillsdale. And he was still going to Western. He'd study at night.
Mm-hmm.
And he went off into his room and would study. And then after he had, I suppose, learned all his lessons, he came in and he would play with us kids.
Uh-huh.
I've always loved Mr. Boyd. And Lucille was a cousin of mine. His wife was a cousin of mine.
Yeah.
So,
Does anybody come to the reunion from quite some distance? Most everybody live within 25, 30 miles, or some people drive a pretty good ways to get to
Eddie
it?
Mae Slate
Eddie Mae
comes every
Slate
year, and
comes.
she lives out of, in Maryland. She lives
Maryland, I believe it's Maryland.
It's
where
just outside
she
Baltimore, I think.
lives. Eddie Mae
Yeah.
comes.
Comes every year.
And
She
she
comes
graduated the first year that I went to Barnes. There was 3 in that graduating class.
Uh-huh.
Willie Ray Link and Eddie Mae. And I can't think who the third one was. But there was only 3 that graduated that year. That's 2 of them.
And she has offered to help or do anything in the world she can for that reunion. She wants
She's
it to
a-
keep going.
She's a Hammond now.
Mhm. Now, I know that a lot of you all have got pictures and memorabilia, and we didn't really get a chance to show many of those today, but got a big scrapbook here that Gib brought that is full of stuff of old pictures and things from the reunions, and I'm sure you get a lot of pleasure from having all this.
I
don't
took them
you,
to the
Sam?
reunion every year, and
I bet that's real
there was a
popular.
crowd around them all the time.
Yeah,
And
well,
Evelyn, you've got a bunch of pictures here
Yeah.
as well,
that's-
from going way
I've got
back,
quite a
yeah.
few.
And-
Did I show you this one?
Uh,
That?
no, this is,
Now, that's one of the superintendents in the old days.
yeah, he's got that handlebar mustache. I'm afraid that's not gonna be big enough to make a whole lot of a picture, but it's a campaign card from, I would say that's probably the early part of the 20th century, maybe. Looks kinda like 1890-ish. So, don't know if you can.
Yeah, I can read it. Chaz Turner.
Oh, okay, all right, good.
Here is the 1925 graduation invitation.
Oh, really? 1925 graduation?
That's my aunt
invitation.
that graduated.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
And let's see, what else I've got here.
okay.
There's
that a
my
4-H
old
book?
4-H club, I was 4-H leader, and that's my old 4-H club record book.
Okay,
I believe
from-
Floyd Galloway was
This is
the,
from 1936. Uh-huh, yeah, yeah. Now,
now this is the old school, the old.
before
school,
the brick
Before
school.
the brick.
All right. Okay,
Here, well, go ahead.
all right, and there's the class. Now, you've got one somewhere.
There are my in-laws, and Henry and Maribel, and they were instrumental in the, I guess they put more money into that than any other person.
Okay, so that's your husband there in the middle, right?
Yes.
The young man and his
And
sister
Maribel.
Maribel,
Mhm.
all right, with their parents, all right.
And this is where they lived in, they homesteaded in Texas, and that's where they homesteaded,
That was their place there,
That
yeah?
was- that was
looks
their-
like about 2 rooms, maybe.
home in Texas.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Let's see, we got a picture here somewhere of the class of 1874. Let me hold this one up. That's that frame building.
Yeah, that's that one that has got.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
125 years ago,
Yeah, I can see it.
or longer, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that people like you all have kept all these things and kept
Oh,
that
I wouldn't
alive.
take the portrait. There is the, let's see. That's
I'm a
the-
pack rat, I never throw nothing
I
away.
don't either.
Me too.
That's the class of 37.
Class of 37, okay. All right, class of 37.
I don't believe we showed this one, did we, Dan?
Oh, wait a minute, is that, I think that's the same
Wait
as
a
this
minute.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
you
the
just
same.
got
This
it
is just
framed.
a,
Yeah.
this Mrs. Donovan was the
One
picture.
man that didn't have a mustache.
That was the
Okay.
picture.
Well, I tell you what, folks, we could stay and look at these pictures a long
Never
time,
see it,
but
Joe.
we've used up our time
Oh,
here.
I'm picture poor.
All right. Well, we're gonna leave our viewers, and we may stay and look at a few pictures and reminisce a little
It
longer.
must be Luther Barnes.
But I want to thank all my guests for coming in today to talk about the
No,
Barnes
that's the
School.
oozes.
Let me, while they
Yeah.
keep looking, let me run down the names again. I'm gonna start over here at the far end. We had Joyce Hardcastle, and next to her, and Pearl Humes, and then Gib Buchanan, and Evelyn Barnes, and I'm Dan Ware, and I thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you again soon with another program.